Hey everyone, welcome back to Steve's View. Today, we're diving into one of the most fascinating and uncomfortable debates in modern America. It's not about just politics or economics. It's about what kind of country America is becoming and what kind of people we are turning into. From the rise of democratic socialism in New York to the decline of traditional manufacturing jobs, to the endless fights over wokeness, capitalism, and culture, the United States seems to be at war with itself. Some say capitalism has failed, others say socialism will destroy us. And a growing number of Americans, especially younger ones, say they don't really believe in either anymore. So today, let's take a deep look at this identity crisis, what's driving it, where both sides are right and wrong, and what it might tell us about America's future. Let's start with something that really caught people's attention: the recent New York City mayoral race. One of the frontrunners was a young Muslim candidate, self-described as a democratic socialist, and he wasn't just some fringe activist. Polls showed him leading for a while. To many conservatives, this was shocking. A socialist mayor in America's largest city? They saw it as proof that New York had lost its mind. A city so obsessed with progressive ideals that it no longer understood what made it work. But to others, especially younger New Yorkers, it made perfect sense. Rents are insane. Public services are falling apart. The rich are richer than ever. So when a candidate promises equality, fairness, and affordable housing, it sounds like common sense, not radicalism. This clash between those two perspectives, the nostalgic defense of capitalism versus the moral call for socialism, is basically the story of America right now. To understand why socialism is gaining traction, especially among the young, we have to rewind to 2008, the financial crisis. That event broke something deep in America's collective psyche. Before 2008, even if people complained about inequality, most still believed that capitalism worked, that if you worked hard and played fair, you could build a decent life. But the financial crash shattered that faith. People saw Wall Street collapse the economy, get bailed out by the government, and then hand out bonuses while millions lost their homes. That was the moment when capitalism stopped feeling like an opportunity and started feeling like a scam. And for a whole generation that grew up during or after that crisis, millennials and Gen Z, capitalism became synonymous with student debt, unaffordable housing, healthcare nightmares, and jobs that don't pay enough to live on. So when they hear socialism, they don't think about the Soviet Union or the Cold War. They think about justice, fairness, and equality. That's why polls from Pew Research and Gallup show that more than 60% of Americans under 30 have a positive view of socialism. And among young Democrats, that number goes as high as 75%. Now, that doesn't mean they want the government to control everything. Most don't even know the classic definition of socialism. What they really want is a more humane version of capitalism, a system that doesn't feel so rigged. But here's where the misunderstanding begins. The word socialism means very different things depending on who says it. To conservatives, it's a dirty word. It means big government, high taxes, and the death of freedom. To progressives, it means fairness, equality, and taking care of each other. But the truth is, most Americans on both sides are using the word wrong. The socialism young Americans want is closer to European social democracy, like Sweden, Norway, or Denmark. Those are still market economies, but with strong safety nets, public health care, and robust labor rights. The socialism conservatives fear is more like the old Soviet model: centralized planning, state control, censorship, and economic stagnation. Both sides are arguing about ghosts, and that's part of the problem. American political debates are full of emotional buzzwords, but almost no one takes the time to define what they actually mean. When you strip away the labels, what most people want is simple: a fair shot at life, affordable housing, decent health care, good schools, dignity at work. That's not socialism. That's just a functioning society. Now, let's be honest. Capitalism in America isn't working the way it used to. The country that once built cars, steel, airplanes, and highways now builds apps, financial instruments, and memes. We don't make things anymore. We monetize attention. The shift from industrial capitalism to financial capitalism created a society where wealth comes from speculation, not production. When you walk through parts of the Midwest or Rust Belt, from Ohio to Michigan to Pennsylvania, you see the legacy of that transformation. Empty factories, hollow towns, and generations of workers left behind. And while Wall Street celebrated record profits, real wages for most Americans have barely grown in 40 years. This isn't capitalism as Adam Smith imagined it. It's capitalism that's been financialized, automated, and detached from the real economy. Even conservatives quietly admit this. But instead of reforming the system, they often double down on slogans like small government and personal responsibility, ignoring the deeper structural issues. Meanwhile, progressives say, just tax the rich and expand welfare, but they too overlook the complexity of how markets, innovation, and incentives actually work. Both sides are stuck in ideological nostalgia, clinging to old labels while the real economy has moved on. It's not just economics, it's emotional. Many Americans, especially young ones, feel like the system has stolen their future. They're told to work hard, get a degree, take on loans, and trust that success will follow. But when they graduate, they find themselves juggling 3 jobs, crushed by debt, and unable to buy a home. That's not laziness, that's despair. And yet, to older generations, it looks like entitlement. They see younger people as lazy, soft, or obsessed with identity politics. This generation gap isn't really about morality, it's about experience. The baby boomers inherited an economy of abundance and growth. Millennials inherited one of debt and precarity. That's why the moral language around work and responsibility doesn't resonate anymore. For many young people, the dream of hard work leading to success feels like a cruel joke. Let's step back for a second. Capitalism at its best isn't just about making money. It's about creating value, innovation, opportunity, upward mobility. It rewards risk-taking, creativity, and productivity. But when the rewards go only to the top, to those who already control capital, algorithms, and networks, capitalism stops being a ladder and becomes a wall. And that's where we are now. The market used to be a tool to build better lives. Now it feels like a force that rules over us. When corporations become too big to fail, when CEOs make 400 times more than workers, when healthcare is a profit center instead of a service, capitalism starts looking less like freedom and more like feudalism. That's why even some conservatives, like Tucker Carlson or Josh Hawley, have begun questioning woke capitalism, the idea that corporations use progressive language to disguise profit motives. The truth is, both the left and right are starting to agree on something fundamental. The system is broken. They just disagree on who broke it. Now, let's be fair. The left has a point. Inequality is out of control. Housing, education, and healthcare are outrageously expensive. And yes, government should play a role in fixing that. But the modern left often confuses moral outrage with policy. It's one thing to demand fairness. It's another to actually design a system that works. Raising taxes or expanding welfare doesn't automatically create justice. If the bureaucracy that runs it is inefficient or corrupt, the poor still lose. We've seen that in big cities like San Francisco, New York, and Los Angeles. Massive spending on homelessness and public programs with very little improvement on the ground. Why? Because problems of poverty, addiction, and inequality are complex. They can't be solved just by writing checks. The right, on the other hand, has its own blind spots. Many conservatives still talk about America as if it were the 1980s, a place where hard work and traditional values guarantee success. But that world doesn't exist anymore. They blame lazy young people for not owning homes, but ignore that housing prices have skyrocketed 500% since their generation bought in. They criticize government spending, but support massive corporate subsidies and tax loopholes. They talk about family values, but oppose the child care, health care, and paid leave policies that actually help families survive. It's not that their values are wrong. Stability, responsibility, and community are essential. It's that they refuse to adapt those values to modern economic realities. So, while the left over-moralizes, the right over-romanticizes, and both sides end up talking past each other while the system keeps decaying. No discussion of America's identity crisis would be complete without mentioning Donald Trump. Love him or hate him, Trump tapped into a very real feeling, the sense that the elites of both parties had abandoned ordinary Americans. When he promised to drain the swamp, he wasn't just talking about corruption. He was talking about a deeper resentment, the feeling that the people running the country no longer represent the country. Trump's appeal wasn't ideological, it was emotional. He spoke to working-class voters who felt betrayed by globalization, ignored by liberals, and mocked by the media. Ironically, though, Trump himself practiced a form of economic nationalism that wasn't purely capitalist. He used tariffs, government pressure, and interventionist policies to protect American industries, things that old-school conservatives would have called socialist. That's what makes Trump such a fascinating and contradictory figure. He's both a billionaire capitalist and a populist interventionist, both the symbol of the system and a protest against it. So what does all this add up to? In simple terms, America has lost its shared story. For decades, capitalism wasn't just an economic model, it was a moral one. Work hard, be honest, build something, and you'll succeed. That was the American dream. But when the system stops rewarding those values, when people work hard and still fall behind, the moral foundation cracks. That's why the debate between capitalism and socialism feels so toxic today. It's not just about economics. It's about identity, fairness, and faith. Not religious faith, but faith in the idea that life makes sense. And right now, millions of Americans have lost that faith. Here's the big question. Can capitalism reform itself before it collapses under its own weight? Some economists say yes, through smarter regulation, better taxation, and stronger labor protections. Others argue that capitalism, by design, always trends toward inequality and concentration of power. But history suggests that capitalism can evolve. The progressive era of the early 1900s, the New Deal of the 1930s, and even the post-war boom of the 1950s all showed that the system can be adjusted to serve people better, when the political will exists. The real danger isn't capitalism itself, it's complacency, the belief that the market will magically fix everything. Markets are tools. They reflect our values. If the only value we feed them is greed, they'll give us greed back. So what can be done? First, America needs a new conversation about value. Not just economic value, but moral value. What do we reward? What do we punish? What kind of behavior do we celebrate? Second, we need leaders, on both the left and the right, who are brave enough to break with ideological orthodoxy. That means conservatives who accept the need for modern social policies, and progressives who respect the power of markets and incentives. Third, we need to rebuild community, real, local, physical community. Because politics can't solve what loneliness and isolation have broken. And finally, we need to restore a sense of purpose. Capitalism without purpose becomes greed. Socialism without freedom becomes tyranny. The balance between them, freedom with responsibility, is what made America unique. When you zoom out, America isn't really a battle between capitalism and socialism. It's a battle between cynicism and hope. Do we still believe that this country can renew itself? Or have we already decided that it's all corrupt and doomed? If we give up on reform, the extremes will win. Populists on the right, ideologues on the left, each feeding off the other's rage. But if we face the hard truth that our system is sick, but not terminal, then maybe we can still heal it. Because the core idea of America isn't capitalism or socialism. It's freedom, creativity, and the constant drive to reinvent ourselves. That's not dead. It's just waiting for a generation brave enough to reclaim it. So what do you think? Is capitalism still fixable, or do we need to start over? Do you think socialism can work in America, or would it destroy what's left of our freedom? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every one. And if you found this deep dive interesting, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss future episodes where we break down the stories shaping our world. Thanks for watching. I'm Steve, and I'll see you in the next one.